That's great, isn't it? That's the Dukes of Stratosphere. Also, well, essentially, that's XTC, really. I mean, by any other name. It's the Dukes of Stratosphere, and that's from a new charity album out right now. What's the album called? Do you know what it's actually called, Andy?
You've got it there in front of you.
It's called The Wish List, I believe.
Yeah, The Wish List, there it is.
No, where's it gone?
It's Under the Wolves and the Walls.
Where's it gone? There they The Wish List. There you are. The Wish List is the album. It's out now. I think you can get it online if you go to... it's the Multiple Sclerosis Society have... are benefiting from that, and it's got a collection of songs to celebrate 50 years of the MS Society. Not an event I would have thought one would necessarily sit down and say, I want to write a song about.
No.
But there you go, they seem to have pulled that off. Neil Gaiman is here with us, ladies and gentlemen. Neil Gaiman is the best-selling author of many, many fine comic books, several novels, and he now has a new children's book out after his bestseller, Coraline, of last year. Neil, thanks for coming in.
Oh, thank you for asking.
Neil Gaiman is also considerably older than myself.
I'm exactly 1 week older.
That's more than enough. That's all that counts, I'm afraid. It's great having you in here. The book looks fabulous.
Well, that's because Dave McKean did all the amazing paintings.
Yeah, you don't even have to read it, ladies and gentlemen. Just buy a copy and look at it. I mean, the words kind of get in the way, if you don't mind me saying so, Neil, a little bit. There's too many words in the book.
There are not too many words. There is exactly the right number of words in that book.
You don't need the story, just a picture. That's...
But the pictures are marvellous.
It is really is an incredible book. And it's a lovely read as well. Coraline was a big hit for you, wasn't it?
Coraline was huge. It came out it took me about 10 years to write, because I was incredibly lazy and didn't think anyone would ever want to read it. And when I finished it, it came out just at the point where they were convinced that adult authors writing children's fiction was the coolest, sexiest thing in the whole world. So Coraline came out that week and has been a bestseller ever since.
I'm sure the fact that Coraline came out helped them come to that conclusion.
I hope so.
It was accidental, but it was kind of a departure for you, because I know you'd written stuff which was sort of kid-friendly beforehand. I mean, some of your comic book stuff, but this was a book which clearly had that sensibility and a broader age group in mind.
Well, I wanted to. Once you sort of start breeding, you get interested in doing things for your children.
That's such a romantic way of looking at the world.
And my daughter Holly, who's sitting in your control room back there, Coraline started for her. She was, many years ago, she was 5, and she'd come home from school, come home from her kindergarten, and she'd climb up on my lap and begin dictating stories, which were all about 5-year-old girls who were imprisoned by witches in cellars and had to try and escape. And there were these horrible, terrifying, traumatic stories. And I thought, what a wonderful thing it is that little kids want stories like this. I think I'll write one.
It is strange, because children do tend to like darker stories. They do tend to like, stuff which many adults think are perhaps too extreme for them or too sort of harsh. And yet the kids like that in their fiction, don't they?
I think so, but also kids live there. I was trying to explain this, did a European tour for Coraline earlier this year, and by the time I got to Denmark, there's obviously something in Coraline that resonated with the Danish psyche, because I'd have these Danish journalists saying, how can you possibly justify bringing out this book for children? I finished it at 3 o'clock in the morning. I walked around to my house and turned on all of the lights. And I did not sleep.
That's a good accent.
Yeah.
You've mastered that. You've studied that. You've worked on that.
I listen to them say it over and over again.
I could listen to you do that all day.
Thank you. And then I went on from there to Italy and was talking to classes of children who'd read the Italian...
Neil, what is going on with this book of yours? It's crazy. This woman has a button for eye.
She does. She has buttons for eyes. It's one of the spookiest things for adults.
That is really scary, actually, that concept.
If you're an adult, if you're a kid, their reaction is buttons for eyes is really cool. I can do a drawing of that, as indeed one of your daughters did.
Yes, my daughter did draw a picture of a button-eyed person for Neil, and he still hasn't paid her for it. So what did the Italians make of the book?
I asked the Italian kids what they thought of it, and whether they were scared by it, and there was a long pause. Then one little girl put up her hand very nervously, and we said yes, and she said, well, it was funny.
See, the Italians, they're more like us.
Well, I think it's kids. Kids read the book, and it's funny, and it's an adventure, and you're down at ground level with Coraline, and they going up against the evil mysteries of her other mother, or the woman who claims to be her other mother, who has black buttons for eyes. Adults get traumatised because they're reading about a child in danger and they're remembering all their childhood fears. Children don't remember their childhood fears, they're living there anyway, so they're learning to conquer them and learning to face them.
There is something about that when you're reading a book and you see the children reacting very differently. I mean, I've read The Walls in the Walls to the children, they loved it. And my wife Jane, she read Coraline to the children. I tried to read it to them, I kept falling asleep. Nothing to do with you, that's my age. That's why we haven't made it through the new Harry Potter book. It's too long. And that's what I like about your books. You know, they are the right length. You know, I think sometimes people, I don't know whether writers either they get quite grand and don't listen to editors anymore, or whether they think they have more to say. But you do notice as books go on in a series, people tend to expand and they get longer and longer. But yours, they're quite fairly crisp, aren't they?
The kids' books I keep crisp because I think that every kids' books get read not once but over and over and over, and then there are poor parents who have to read them to them over and over and over. So I do try and keep the kids' books short and effective. But my adult stuff, now I'm best-selling enough that when the editors say, make it short, make it crisp, I say, no, I'm going to ramble.
You see, you shouldn't ramble. I'm going to edit your next book for you, Neil. That's a free offer for you. Send it to me, I've got a blue pencil ready. American Gods, we could have finished that in half the time. I was reading... It's a great read, American Gods, which was Neil's novel, which came out a couple of years ago. It's a mythic story, and he travels around America a lot.
It's a giant road trip of a novel.
And I was thinking, well, we could leave Nantucket out, surely. Chicago we all know about. Let's skip ahead.
I've been doing this Marvel comic, 1602, and it's actually had to. I had this huge, rambling, enormous plot, then suddenly facing the realities of 22 pages a month, chunks of plot get thrown out the window like fridges.
But that must be quite a nice discipline to have in some ways, isn't it? I mean, it's difficult to work to, I guess, but in a different way, surely having those constraints brings out something in you, a creativity or a desire to conquer those?
Yes, and occasionally you wind up taking much longer to write something than you would have done at 32 pages because you have to figure out how to do it in the shortest possible way.
Yeah, well, that's what's nice about comic books, of course, is that economy.
You learn economies. You learn economies of dialogue. You can only put 35 words in a panel, and otherwise it's going to fill with words.
But of course you have the pictures to help tell that story, which is why comics can. I mean, I know there are probably quite a lot of people listening who still don't read comic books, adults who still consider them to be kid stuff, perhaps. And that's fine. I mean, that's, their choice. But it is a shame because there are so many books out there, so many comic books which have so many adult ideas and so many bright and brave concepts in them. And many of them being your work, of course. I mean, the Sandman books in particular.
We're now, 16, 17 years on from the first articles with headlines like Wham! Smash Pow! Comics have grown up.
Yeah.
And there was actually an article in the Daily Telegraph, of all things, 2 or 3 days ago saying, well, we're way past that. So at the point where they're starting to write about me and Alan Moore and, the Jimmy Corrigan books and Love and Rockets and stuff in the Telegraph, I think we may have finally caught up with society.
Although in a way, although I've been a champion of comics for years, as you know, and I still go out and read all my regular comic books. I still buy the kind of ones which seem like they're for kids, like Spider-Man and the X-Men, all those, and I still enjoy those. I then felt that maybe we lost something by getting adult with the comic books because there's a kind of darkness which permeates and a kind of cynicism or an adult sort of tone which permeates even kind of the fresher comics now.
The thing that I did this year that I had probably the most fun with was when Art Spiegelman, who was the founder of the whole comics growing up with Mouse thing, contacted me and said he was doing a book of comics for kids because there weren't any comics for kids anymore. And he's doing this series called Little Lit. And I wound up working with Gahan Wilson.
Oh, the fantastic American artist.
The American cartoonist who always used to do those comics in Playboy. Those one-page cartoons, which were always very gross and sinister and strange. And when I was a little kid, I'd go into W.H. Smith's and go up on tiptoes and reach down that copy of Playboy and thumb through to try and get to the Gahan Wilson cartoon.
Of course you did, that's right. We all used to look at Playboy for the cartoons and the interviews, and occasionally you might fall open on another page.
I just wanted to see that Gahan Wilson
cartoon. Neil,
they'd shout at me. I'd never...
Get out, stop looking at the cartoons. When have you ever actually heard that? Stop those children looking at the cartoons. Let's have some more music. We'll chat to Neil some more after this. That was The Kings. Listen to Jonathan Ross and Andy Davis here on Radio 2, and our guest at the moment is Mr. Neil Gaiman, who is a best-selling author, who, though, I'm sure quite a lot of people won't actually have heard of you yet, which is you, because you're in that strange position, are you, where you have a huge following of people who've loved your work and come to you via comic books and maybe have read one or two of your novels or seen your children's book, and yet you haven't kind of exploded out there yet in that way where you're a name that everyone identifies.
Yeah, I'm not... I sort of exist in either you've read my stuff and you love it, or you're Neil Gaiman, who's he? Never heard of him. Which I think I like. I think I prefer that to being someone like John Grisham, who everybody sort of knows who he is, even if they've read his books or not.
Yeah.
But also part of that is just because I do so many things in so many odd places. And
well, we don't need to talk about those things. I know there are several court cases still pending, and he wasn't exposing himself as such. Just the wind caught his trousers, and the audience that turned out last night. Neil was in London here to do a book signing and a book reading of The Wolves in the Walls, which is the new book, which is kind of for everyone, but it's suitable for children as well, and it's absolutely beautiful. If you're in a bookshop and you get a chance and you see a copy, pick it up and thumb through it, because the illustrations. It's a lovely story, but the illustrations as well are just exceptional, aren't they? Really beautiful.
They're wonderful. It's Dave McKean, and Dave's a genius. And Dave and I have been working together for 17 years, and he still surprises me. I gave him the words, I gave him the story about this girl who thinks there are wolves living in the walls of her house, and she tells her parents, and they tell her it's mice or rats or something, and they are, of course, wrong, and she is, of course, right. And one night the wolves come out of the walls, and it's what happens. And Dave took about 2 years to do the art, mostly because he kept putting it off. And then when he handed it in, he'd done this thing where all of the physical objects are manipulated photographs, computer manipulated. All the people are oil paintings. And the wolves are these mad, scratchy Stedman-esque ink drawings. And then he composited it together. And somehow it works.
I think with all those different things, I don't think he's doing anything. I think he's farming it out to 3 different factories in like China or Thailand or someone, and there's one group who do the computers, and he just said, send them all back in. I haven't finished it yet, Neil. I'm just waiting for the new delivery. That's what's going on there. He's pulling the wool over your eyes, my friend.
It's so easily fooled.
You know what I loved about seeing you last night and doing the thing last night is the audience that come out to see you, the crowd that are devoted to your work. It's such a bizarre cross-section. I mean, there are several distinct kind of subgroups within your fan base. You've got your comic book fans, who, as we all know, and I number myself amongst them, are normally people who don't really know how to interact socially with other human beings. For many of us, the concept of personal hygiene is a distant one. And they were represented in full force last night, God bless them. Then you have your gothic crowd. You've got your goth fans who love Neil's work as Sandman. Such a cross-section of people, and they were just so excited to hear you read from the book. I hadn't realised how much your stuff means to people. It's really, presumably you're used to this now, but it's a strange kind of event, isn't it, when a writer actually gets to read for his audience.
And that was also, we were doing it for Foyles in Congress Hall last night, and it's such a great venue because you could actually... the acoustics were great. It meant I could sort of do the kind of reading that writers love to get to do, where you get into the nuances of the word, as opposed to just sort of yelling it out into a failing public address system in Waterstones, which is what you're normally reduced to.
I was interested you read the whole book out.
Well, it's not a long book.
I know, but I thought, come on, give them something to get excited about when they buy it. Don't tell them the ending. Leave the last page so they'll buy one on the way out. Oh, we've got to go to the news. I just realised we're getting late. Neil, stick around. We'll chat some more after this. 88 to 91 FM. This is Radio 2 from the BBC. The king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley. We're here with Mr. Neil Gaiman. He's the author of, various best-selling books, but he's currently got a new book out, I guess in time for Christmas, is the thinking. The Wolves in the Walls. It's a really... I can't... impress upon you enough just how beautiful looking this book is. The design work and the artwork by Dave McKean is just out of this world, isn't it? It really is lovely. And the story's okay.
Thank you.
Now, you guys are working on a movie together as well, aren't you?
We are. Actually, I did all my work about a year and a half ago, but poor Dave actually gets an entire year of working on the film because 3/4 of it is CGI, computer-generated imagery and animation and backgrounds and stuff, so...
It's strange the way films have gone like that now, and there's so many movies, even movies that you don't necessarily think of, a special effects film, have CGI, like Amélie, the movie Amélie, had a lot of work done where they removed the graffiti in Paris and, other touches like that. So much post-production goes on in movies, but this, of course, is sort of a fantasy film.
Well, yeah, I mean, this was... the Jim Henson Company came to me and Dave and said, would you make us a... $100 million fantasy epic, and we'll give you $4 million to make it. And Dave said yes. He had these brilliant and wonderful ideas, so we shot the film, all the live action stuff, in June and July. It's called Mirror Mask, and it's a film for kids. And for most of the shooting, they were in this huge blue studio where everything was blue, and Now they're digitally removing all the blue, and the actors are interacting with these peculiar Dave McKean people in this wonderful Dave McKean world.
Have you seen any of the footage yet? I mean, has he finished any of it?
I actually went out to his little studio in Finsbury Park, where he's got 15 people sitting there huddled over computers, and he took me around and introduced me to each one of them, and they showed me what they were doing, and it was sort of like, this is John, he's doing the tendrils. And suddenly I'd see some giant tendrily things on the screen reaching out for a floating giant and dragging him down, and he'd take me along, and this is so-and-so, and he's doing the Black Tower. And I'd see, and we'd pan into the Black Tower, and Dave said, "Oh, I think it needs to be a bit smokier there."
It's all done in such. It's incredible, isn't it? You can make a movie like that these days.
Well, what's amazing is, especially again with Dave McKean, I wrote this film. I watched them shoot this film. I still had no idea what it would look like until 2 days ago, when I started to get an inkling of what kind of film this is going to be and what they're making. And I think it's going to astonish people what Dave has managed to do and will manage to do with the money that he has.
Now, these are the people, the Henson Company, of course, they had The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth out. So this is, presumably, it was the success of those films, or the success after the event of those films when they came out on DVD.
It was the long-term success of those films on DVD. Sony TriStar, who had the rights to them, turned around to Henson and said, if you could give us something else like that.
Now, of course, Labyrinth had David Bowie in it.
It did,
and the unfortunately named Goblin King. But that's quite a performance from Dave there, of course. There's no appearance of David in any of these, unfortunately?
No David Bowie.
No, any goblins?
No, we're actually completely goblin-free, although we wrote it in Jim Henson's old house in Hampstead, which the Henson family lent us their house. Partly because we were doing this thing on such a tight budget we couldn't afford to put me and Dave up in a hotel. And the house actually hadn't been touched since Henson died. And it was still, sort of rotary dial phones and flock wallpaper from 1979. And strange rotting Muppets, because they're made of latex. And Dave and I actually found a 3.5-hour cut of Labyrinth. And and we phoned up Lisa Henson. We said, do you mind if we watch this? And she said, no, watch anything. So over several nights, we watched the original rough cut of Labyrinth with an awful lot more of David Bowie as the Goblin King.
This is the bombshell.
The bulges in David Bowie's
that was some crotch he had there as a Goblin King.
It was an amazing one.
Presumably that's a Goblin trait.
I'm hoping...
That's why they seem so sure of themselves.
I'm hoping the beautiful Gina McKee, who is our sort of dark queen, will actually make some people forget David Bowie. But it will probably fail.
No one can forget Dave in those pants. That's why goblins are so confident. The elves are known as the little people for a very good reason. Fairies don't even come into it, but goblins, that's what you want to be.
Yeah.
When I come back, I'd like to be a goblin. I'm really looking forward to see the movie. I mean, when will it be out? When will it be finished?
I think they're planning right now to have everything done. They have like 3 or 4 months of animation, and then several months while giant computers do something called rendering, which is a technical process that I have no idea what it actually means.
It's got something to do with where the computer loses all your diary details, I believe.
Exactly.
That's my limited knowledge of what goes on there. I could not be happier for you, Neil. I'm a huge fan. I'm a friend of Neil's, I should, in the interest of full disclosure, but I've become a friend of Neil's because I admired his work so much and came to him that way. So this is a genuine endorsement, but if you see anything with Neil Gaiman's name on, you're guaranteed a good read. And I recommend the Sandman series, if you see those out there. I obviously recommend Coraline, I recommend American Gods, but most importantly, at this time of year, if you're looking for a gift for anyone of any age, The Wolves in the Walls is the thing to get. It's written by Neil Gaiman, it's illustrated by Dave McKean, it's out now from Bloomsbury Press. There was a rave review of this in the Sunday Times, wasn't there?
There was. It was wonderful. They made it their book of the week, although the reviewer actually put this line in saying, it's all based around the old saying, if the wolves come out of the walls, it's all over. I read that. I thought, that's not an old saying. It's just something I made up in my book.
Yes, Sunday Times. Yeah.
It's sloppy journalism.
Sloppy journalism. I don't think you should be biting the hand that feeds us because they love the book.
It was their book of the week, and they loved it. And,
Neil Gaiman, his new book is out now, ladies and gentlemen, The Wolves in the Walls. Get yourself a copy if you see one. Neil, really, it's so much fun having you on the show. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And please, if you get the chance, when you go back and see Dave at the movie, slip at least one goblin.
We'll put a goblin in there for you, just a little one, somewhere.
I'm available.
Oh, we actually want you to be in the film. Did I
I'm
tell you that?
available and I've got my own tights.
Would you like to be one of the Black Guards?
No, I want to be a goblin. Surely that's been
You'd
established.
be a goblin underneath the helm of your blackguardness.
That's
you would
no good.
you would get to say a line
No
like,
one wants to be a goblin underneath. You want to be a goblin on the surface.
You can play a goblin. Do you want to play a goblin?
I don't think the word goblin's been used so much on Radio 2 ever before in the history. And let's face it, Jimmy Young was one. Was one. Thank you so much for coming in, Neil. Good luck with the rest of your stay here in the UK. I know you're back to the States soon.
Thank you very much, and sorry about all the goblins.
Yeah, what do you mean all the goblins? There's no goblins.
This is for Neil, bit of Thea Gilmore.
Lovely.